All right, the recording has started, and we're ready for our event. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Anderson. And Dr. Anderson is from our Department of Criminal Justice, and I will leave it to her right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Burley, and thank you so much, everyone, for coming today to our panel. I know it is an absolutely crazy time of the year, so we definitely appreciate your attendance today, and we hope that learning more about this very valuable tool of research, qualitative methods, will be very fruitful for everyone. We're extremely excited about the panel of scholars that we have for y'all. They're definitely all experts within the field, having Dr. Rice, having Dr. Jones, Dr. Rose, and Dr. Buckley for you, I think will be a real treat this afternoon. So just to kind of explain the format of today, first they will be presenting on various aspects of qualitative research. Some will be discussing their own research, and then we will go to the Q&A portion of today. So with that being said, I would like to introduce my own very valued colleague, Dr. Rice, who is I just wanted to say what a mentor and a friend he is, and just, what a wonderful colleague he is. So honored that he is here today. So just to touch on a few highlights of his absolutely wonderful career. Just again, these are a few among many. So with Dr. Rice's history, in the field, I just wanted to mention these, and my computer has been difficult today. So just if you guys do not mind bearing with me, I'm actually going to my phone because my computer was freezing up when I was trying to go in between screens when I was doing this earlier. So anyway, Dr. Johnny Rice is currently serving as Assistant Professor of Criminal Justice here at Coppin State University. And prior to joining Coppin, he worked as Senior Program Associate with the Supervised Visitation Initiative at the Vera Institute of Justice. He has spent the past 22 years providing leadership, technical assistance, and support to organizations that serve low-income fathers and families in the areas of child welfare, youth development, and criminal justice, in the efforts to create safe and stable communities. Prior to joining Vera, he worked as a public administrator for the Maryland Department of Human Resources. And at DHR, he served as the state administrator for the Victims of Crime Act program, the Violence Prevention and Services Act, the Rape Crisis and Sexual Assault program, and federal and state funded and responsible fatherhood programs. Also to mention, his portfolio there encompassed emergency food and homeless services programs, and he has previously held the position of Chief Operating Officer and Director of the nationally recognized Men's Services Responsible Fatherhood Program at the Center for Urban Families in Baltimore. So just to mention a few of his past accomplishments that have brought him here to Coppin. And actually, he is mentoring me as well in qualitative research. So just wanted to throw that out there as well, that he has been an amazing guide. And so without further ado, introducing Dr. Johnny Rice.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. I appreciate the introduction. And of course, it's an honor to be here with not only colleagues, but most importantly, students who are here today to listen to some of the information that we are going to share. If you all give me a moment, I'm going to do my best to share my screen. Okay, I think someone else is sharing, so you may have to unshare so I can share. All right, thank you. All right, and let me see if I can go from my current slide here. Okay. All right, can you all see the PowerPoint? All right, thank you. Again, I'm excited to be here, and I have the tough job of setting the stage before my distinguished colleagues who will come after me with a lot of great information. But I did want to ground us and establish the foundation as to why qualitative research, what are the benefits of qualitative research, and from my perspective, a community lens, a criminal justice lens, qualitative research can assist us in amplifying the voice and telling the stories of our community. Now, in its most basic level, qualitative research is comprised of written or spoken words with no direct numerical interpretation. That's in contrast to quantitative research that, of course, uses numbers to describe social phenomena. So oftentimes when you hear about large-scale surveys that are administered throughout the country, those large-scale surveys are often quantitative in nature. Some of you, for your research projects, may have went to governmental sites and been able to download very large data sets, right? Quantitative in nature, and had these Excel spreadsheets that you're looking through trying to conduct analysis. Well, qualitative is somewhat different in that it speaks more to the voice and the experience of the participants that you're focused on. So it's important to recognize that aspect. Now, in terms of qualitative data can often be text, video, or audio, and it can come from information that's obtained directly or indirectly. And I'm sure you'll see and hear about some of the direct and indirect ways as my colleagues explain their research projects that they have a passion and love for. So what are some of the main types of qualitative research? Well, there are several, and they're based off of, in many aspects, theory. Well, Dr. Rice, what's theory? Well, theory and concepts assist us in understanding why someone may do the things that they do. Theory helps us to understand human behavior and interpret it in a meaningful way. And so with qualitative research, there are types that assist us in getting a theoretical understanding as to why certain events occur and delving deeper to get the meaning behind those events. So we have case studies, we have grounded theory, we have phenomenology, ethnography, as well as historical. And I'm not going to read them all, but I will say, for instance, ethnography allows us to get a better understanding of the cultures of different groups, the culture around us. Phonology allows us, from a firsthand experience, to get a deeper understanding and meaning out of what it is we may see and observe. Each of these qualitative research areas often are or serve as a framework for those who conduct scientific study from a qualitative perspective. So as a student, if you say, I want to do qualitative research, your professor may say, well, what's the theoretical framework? Or what's the conceptual model that's guiding the research you're going to carry out? And so these would be examples of those type of frameworks and models that you would tell your professor, this is what my research is going to be led by. So there's just different ways you can collect and carry out qualitative research. You have participant observation, intensive interviewing, and focus groups. And there are other as well that are more drilled down. You have autoethnography, where your voice is a major part of the research. You have expert interviews, where you bring together a round table of persons from a specific field and you give them questions to learn more about a certain area that you want to learn more about. But these are the basic frameworks that we see a lot of qualitative research take format that we see. Participant observation. That may be you observing different things that you see in the community, in the home, in the environment of research. Intensive interviewing. Developing questions that will help you learn more about your study population. You may want to learn more about victims of domestic violence. So you will develop questions that are open-ended to get that information. What do I mean by open-ended and unstructured questioning? So for example, if I ask you, have you been affected by the death of George Floyd, yes or no? You could check off yes, you could check off no. That's closed-ended. That would tell me that you as a person, if you say yes, were affected. But it doesn't tell me how you were affected. So if I ask you, how were you affected by the death of George Floyd? Not a yes or no answer. it's open for you to share how you feel and provide insight and depth that the yes/no question could not give. Focus groups are also interesting because focus groups allow us to bring together people who may be affected by a certain issue, ask them guided questions that are developed in advance to learn more about an issue. So for example, you may go into a group home to try to get a better understanding of the experiences of those youth that have been in that group home for over a year. And you may interview together collectively 9 to 12 of those young men or young women as a part of that program that live there and ask them different questions so you can learn what their experience has been like over that past 12 months. You will be face to face with your clients, with your study participants often in the field. As many of you all know through your research classes, or may not know, if you do any original research that involves human subjects, you have to get Institutional Review Board approval. And so a lot of the information that you acquire, you will use surveys or questionnaires, and you'll be face-to-face with the subjects or virtual, and you'll be asking them those questions. Indirectly, we use records to answer questions, may conduct a study or content analysis where you're looking at information and gathering information from data sources, not human subjects, to get a better understanding of meaning. I'm not going to go through this chart that shows qualitative versus quantitative, but I do want you to see the variation between the two. Qualitative focuses on meaning, whereas quantitative focuses on count. Each of them has a love to a degree for the effect of social phenomena, but qualitative allows you to get rich information and actually share the particular voice of each of those cases or individuals that are interviewed. The researcher is understood as an instrument, his or herself, and also attention to impact of researchers and other values of course analysis is important, with the focus on getting a greater understanding of our community, of the social forces in it. So I've kind of given you a quick snapshot of what is qualitative research, the difference between quantitative and qualitative, and also the different theoretical frameworks that guide qualitative research. But just stepping back for a minute, why do any research, right? Let alone qualitative. Well, one of the reasons we want to conduct qualitative research because it gets us close to the community so that we can better understand the lived experience. And as social scientists, I don't care if you're social work, if you're in rehabilitation, counseling, psychology, criminal justice, or even other areas across the university, social science can help us get a better grasp of what is happening to individuals, what's happening in society, and the processes that guide human behavior. And so again, we can acquire insight into social forces by really conducting research that allows us to ask the following questions. Why do people do the things that they do? Why do organizations function the way that they do? How are people affected by their experiences? So as social scientists in training, as criminologists in training, as social workers in training, as psychologists, psychiatrists in training, these are all questions that we ask so that we can acquire a better understanding of the impact of the various systems in our society. And by understanding the positive aspects of those systems and the negative aspects of those systems, we can affect change based on empirical data, not based off of how I feel, but based off of getting insight from the study population. Some people think that qualitative research means no rigor, but there is still the application of the scientific approach. And that's important because as researchers who are out in the field, we cannot let our own personal feelings and bias negatively influence our objectivity. So the science still leads in qualitative research the same way science leads in quantitative research. Now, again, why conduct qualitative research? There are policy motivations, there are academic motivations, and there are personal motivations that move all of us to explore different types of qualitative research. We may want to understand why a program's effective or why a program isn't effective. Qualitative research will allow us to learn from the population that's actually enrolled in the program, as well as stakeholders. Academic motivations. As a researcher, I'm interested in gun violence. And so I'm a part of a qualitative project that's going to allow me to interview in Baltimore City, along with student researchers, individuals, young Black males between the age of 15 to 24 that may have experience in possessing firearms. The hope is to get a better understanding as to what motivates individuals to carry firearms so that we can use this information from a prevention framework to make our community safer. And then there's also personal motivations. You could have been a young person who grew up in foster care, and you want to, as an adult, now learn more about your respective experience. And so you may conduct research within the Baltimore City Department of Social Service to get an insight into other young people's experiences that are also in foster care. Policy motivations. Are programs successful? Applied to criminal justice, looking at what works, what doesn't work, right? So does the DARE program work? Does programs such as Scared Straight work? Qualitative research can give us insight. Academic motivations, human trafficking, an emerging, continuing to grow area within criminal justice. You know, I may want to speak to directors or administrators of programs that actually provide support services to victims to assess the effectiveness of that, the interventions. And also personal motivations. You may be someone that wants to write a book or is interested in a unique area that is different from the mainstream, but it's something that inspires you. So here, Killer said, The Strange History of Performers Dying on Stage. So this was someone who was interested in conducting research, qualitative research, looking at all incidents that were on record of individuals who have died performing. And that can be important information to someone who works in arts and entertainment from a liability perspective. And it can also give you an understanding of assessment of risk. In terms of qualitative research, exploratory and evaluative in nature. What do I mean by exploratory? We seek to find out, conducting qualitative research, how people get along in specific settings and situations, the meaning behind people's actions, and what issues concern people. So if I go interview someone in the field meaning in the community, at an organization, my goal is to try to understand what is going on. Here's an example of a gang member, Project Bo. With Project Bo's interview online, you can go through the interview and you can determine through those questions that are being asked to Project Bo what is going on. Evaluation research, also a part which can be conducted under the umbrella of qualitative research, seeks to determine the effect of social programs and other types of intervention. Here in Richmond, California, is a program that's centered on gun violence. And the program pays offenders so that they won't engage in future gun violence. And it also enrolls them in a life skills employment program. And so evaluation of programs such as these will be critical to stakeholders. In closing out, what are some of the major benefits and risks? The benefits of qualitative research is oftentimes it's cheaper because you're using much smaller data sets. You may be interviewing 25 people or up to 150 people, but it may be smaller groups. Focus group may be 9 to 12 people. your round table may be a small group of people as well. And some of the risks, of course, are the lack of generalizability and the bias of the researcher, you bringing your own attitudes to the table. So I'm going to stop here. And as I discussed previously, the gun violence research, this is just a snapshot of qualitative in-depth interviews that I will be hopefully carrying out with student researchers soon. Again, I apologize for taking long, but I did want to share some of my insights with you. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was so good, Dr. Rice. We appreciate that. Was that good, y'all? Can we get some virtual hand claps? Some love in the chat. Thank you. All right. Well, we are going to thank you so much, Dr. Rice, for setting the stage for us and giving us some background information about qualitative research and telling us a little bit about what you have going on. And now we are going to move to our next speaker, none other than Dr. Gary Jones from the Department of Social Work. And we'll just so you know, if you have questions for the speakers, we'll have some time at the end that we've allowed, especially for questions. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Jones. Here, if I can find my document here. And I know most of us know Dr. Jones because he is a professor in our department, the Department of Social Work. And we are very thankful that he has taken the time out of his busy field placement schedule to join us. So a little bit about Dr. Jones. His practice and research experiences are in the areas of child welfare, family formation, and racial equity, and the role of social determinants on well-being. He has served for 20 years as a social worker in various capacities in Alabama, Tennessee, and Maryland. He is currently the Director of Field Education at Coppin State University, which is within the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences. And I just noticed that we have a lot of Alabama action going on in here. Dr. Jones has an Alabama. Did you go to, Dr. Jones, did you go to Oakwood as well? I can't remember.
Yes, ma'am. Proud alumnus.
Okay, all right. I'm an Alabama girl. I didn't go to Oakwood, but I'm from Alabama, born and raised. And Dr. Jones is from Mississippi, and he is forever calling every one of us ma'am and sir. So good Southern hospitality. So, all right, Dr. Jones, we are thankful to have you, and we will turn it over to you so that you can tell us about your qualitative research project.
Okay. So greetings, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Rice. Thank you, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Burley, Dr. Rose. As we just discussed our experience with qualitative research, I had the opportunity to be on 3 qualitative research teams. And so that journey experiences really has assisted in my understanding of the benefits of qualitative research. So let's begin our process. All right. So Dr. Rice, he talked about how qualitative research, it provides an opportunity for you to explore, explain, and describe. Qualitative research is really an opportunity to hear the lived experience, the stories, the opportunities, the journey of our clientele, groups, and communities. And that's why I fell in love with the method of qualitative research. I'm very interested in the human experience. This is the process that I went through to complete my studies on the research I'm going to talk about today. I have completed many years in child welfare, as well as working with homeless youth. So you may take your interests as well as current events. And you have to make sure that as you take your interest in current events, is grounded in literature, past studies. We don't want to replicate something that was a failure or we already have answers to. So you want to make sure that all your interests, your research, or whatever you do, and qualitative or quantitative, is grounded in literature. The literature reviews, those biographies, those annotated biographies that you all love to do in your classes, all those are preparing you to do literature reviews so that to make sure that your research and research question is grounded in literature. It's very important that it's grounded in literature. EBSCOhost is your friend. And so all those articles you're reading, it will guide you in the process. And so because of my research questions, it aided in me choosing qualitative research as my method. All right. And so as I look at my study, these are some questions that emerge from my study that I completed. It's actually been maybe 2 years ago. 2 years ago, completed my study. And so my study had 3 questions. The 3 questions are as follows. How do foster care youth participate and perceive romantic relationships before, during, and after being in foster care? My interest was supportive networks. There are many studies on supportive networks and talked about how in foster care, when they're connected to adults, they have a better chance in life with making different decisions. And so I want to look at romantic relationships as related to support networks. I worked with young mothers, young teens, and romantic relationships was something that we always grappled with in my program. And so I want to study and investigate it. And so one of the things I had to make sure was, I'm going to get to a little later, but the inclusion and exclusion. Those who were part of my study, they were never my former clients because that would impact the results. And so these are the overarching research questions that guided to have a deeper understanding of how we can push healthy romantic relationships and family formation. My second question was, what experiences shape romantic relationships among former foster care youth? I want to know how did foster care impact their ability to perceive, participate in those type of relationships. And so I went on a journey with them and they agreed to be a part of the process. I had to get IRB approval through that journey. And so Dr. Rice talked about the different types of research methods, 3 types that you can participate in. And so ethnography is just having an opportunity to sit on the side and to observe the process that the individuals go through. There's a great book by Elijah Anderson. It is titled it'll come to me after the presentation, but Elijah Anderson, Code of the Streets, a very wonderful book that talks about the lived experiences of individuals in a neighborhood. That was an example of ethnography. Phenomenology is what I did. And so that you're able to go on a journey with your clients or your group to really have a deeper understanding from their perspective. Qualitative research gives you opportunity to have a better understanding of the human experience from the clients, from the participants' perspective. Many times, other studies, other methods, you prescribe what they can answer, A, B, C, or D. As a qualitative researcher, I want to know what they experience, what's important to them, not important to me. And so that's a value we have as social workers, social scientists, what's important to the society and community. And as a qualitative researcher, I can ask those questions and not prescribe. Also, another method, or one of many, is grounded theory, where the theoretical frameworks emerge from the study. But the study that I did was phenomenology, where I had opportunity to learn and go on a journey about the lived experiences of former foster care youth as it relate to romantic relationships. And that was my process. And so with qualitative research, you can collect data so many different ways. Online, that because of COVID-19, online is virtual spaces utilized, online surveys, groups. You can do web surveys. I did in-depth interviews. And so my interviews were like an hour to an hour and a half, interviewing my clients, my participants in that process. And so I did in-depth interviews and it took an hour and a half. And my process, it went from October it took me an entire year. I interviewed 9 individuals. Why take a year? Because the lived experience of former foster care youth, I had to work on their schedule. It wasn't about me as we went through this process. So it took me an entire year to collect my data. And I'm going to show you some of the findings as we move forward. So my sample size was 9. Why 9? In quantitative research, we look for saturation. after 9 participants, I received the same content, the same data. And so my professor, my dissertation chair, said, you have reached saturation forward. So it's very important that your data, you're driven by your data. And qualitative research, you're driven by data, and you can have small sample sizes, 6 to 9 is recommended with a phenomenology study. You can do case studies, which could be one person, one school. But for my study, 9 was a sample size. And when I looked at the demographics, because I did actually age, the age range was from 21 to 24. So all of my cases, participants, they were formerly in foster care. And so some of them may have exited 21. Some may be on care for 4 years. And I asked the question, when they enter foster care? Some at 10, some at 17. I can look at research to see what does research say about that process. What does research say about when individuals come into care or when they exit care? In most states, at 17, the department would not allow a child to come into care because of their age. But this particular youth, they came into care a day before he turned 18. And so he was experienced foster care. And many states are different. The state of Maryland, you have the choice of remaining in foster care to the age of 21. And so all of my participants remain to the age of 21. Different experiences, but some similarities as well with my study. And so in my process, I took field notes. I took field notes before the interviews, after the interviews, and during the interviews. Rich data is given to you. And each interview we have to transcribe. One interview was 30 pages. One interview was 30 pages. I had 9. So imagine having packets of paper, 9 stacks of 30 pages or more, front and back, single space. After the interviews, we have to type them up. So I only typed up one of my interviews, and I paid to have my other interviews transcribed. I want to have that experience. Like Dr. Rice is smiling. Yeah, I want to have that one experience, but I didn't want to have it to 9. I wanted to graduate. And so I had to pay for a service, review the transcripts, and 8 themes emerge. And I use a software to help in that process. There are many softwares you can use, but I use Enevo. You can use Atlas, Web, QDR, or Hyper Research. I love Enevo. It's user-friendly, and many researchers that I partner with utilize this program, and it's very user-friendly. And we can come back one day and talk about the benefits of software. And I have a couple more slides and I will be done. In my study, there were several themes that emerged, 8 themes. These themes are the lived experiences of my participants. One of my themes is show me, don't tell me you love me. Again, I interviewed former foster care youth, and I want to know what were their experiences. And so this emerged over and over again. Do you see what I see? If it's meant to be, it will be. Some theories that emerged from my study were attachment theory, social learning theory, constructivist theory. All of those theories were interrelated that gave my theoretical conceptualization foundation in that process, because you want to make sure that your research study is grounded in literature as well as theoretical framework in that process. So I'm just going to share a couple of the experiences. So I said my study, 8 things emerge. And so one of the things was show me, don't tell me you love me. And one of my participants, and notice I have the name, pseudonym, confidentiality. And so my participants select their own name, and my advisor wants to make sure I put the page number and the line to find that quote. She wanted to make sure that anyone who have any questions can go back to my study and find the exact quote in that process. And so I'm going to share one of the thoughts. I've gotten hurt so many times, so it's like my wall is always up, and I'm very on the defense side when it comes to relationships now because of what I have been through when I was younger. So, and mainly run people away before I actually give them a chance because of my past. I'm still suffering with that till this day. So it's like, I do not know. And so because of placement after placement, rejection. This is some of the sentiments that my participants felt with. I want to share one more experience. Foster care F my life up, pardon my French. And so this is what was stated. It impacted me because I was looking for someone to love me, because I am in this space for real, place for real. And I did not know that I have anybody. It kind of give you that thought, for real, I'm here and alone. So it's just like build that thing with your significant other, because I am here and I need you. So foster care with this individual, let the person know that their significant other was significant. I learned so much from this study. Some of the takeaways that I had biases and assumptions, because one of my questions asked about social media. I thought that young people use social media. Time and time again, my participant said, no, I don't want anybody in my business. I didn't use it in that process because of their attachments, because of their abandonment issues. They did not want to take information, but there's so much richness in the data, you can get lost, which is why you need a software and a team to work with you in that process. And so these are just some of the quotations that you receive as a result of doing qualitative research in that process. And it's a journey. I learned much, learned a lot in that process. As a researcher, you want to make sure that you want to hear their story and not pushing your bias upon them. And when you hear their story, after the research has been completed, our participants can look over the recordings, hear the recordings, as well as the transcriptions and the findings to make sure that the results match what their sentiments are. And so those are ways for rigor. You just can't turn a document in. You have to take several steps to complete this journey. And this journey is constructivist. The researcher, participants working together to create new knowledge in that process. So thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. That was wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Jones.
Yes, that was good. I hope y'all taking some good notes. Y'all ready to go do your own qualitative research? Okay, Easter said yes. Okay, Krishan is smiling. This is our senior class. All of this crew is getting ready to go to graduate school. So they are about to start doing the work. So thank you again, Dr. Jones, for all of that valuable information. Shamia says she appreciates this info. So thank you, as well as Dr. Rice. Good stuff, good stuff. So we're going to keep it on going because we have some questions that we have, and I know the students and other colleagues. I see some of our other colleagues as well. Let me just shout them out real quick. I see Dr. Brothers Gray on. I thought I saw Dr. Hudgens a moment ago. That was your timer going off, Dr. Jones. Maybe he stepped out, but I saw him earlier. So thank you, Dr. Brothers Gray, for being with us. So now next we have coming to the stage the Dr. Theta Rose. Let me find her so I can bring her to the virtual stage. Oh, there she is. All right, Dr. Rose, hey. All right, welcome. So now I am going to tell you a little bit about Dr. Rose so that I can get out the way and she can share her presentation. Dr. Theta Rose is an assistant professor at the University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Social Work. So around the corner, down the street, across the bridge somewhere, not far from here. Dr. Rose earned her PhD in social work from the National Catholic School of Social Service, Catholic University. She earned her MSW from Stony Brook University in New York and a BA in psychology from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. Using an asset-based approach, Dr. Rose's research centers on contextual factors related to the promotion of mental well-being and positive youth development among youth of color, and the importance of youth perspectives in research and intervention development and delivery. So we are so excited to have Dr. Rose. I told some of the folks earlier, Dr. Rose and I went to Catholic University together. Oh, wow. It's been quite a while now. And she was my research tutor, y'all. So when I needed help with statistics, she's the one I went to. She kept me from being on the side of the road like this. She helped the sister out. So I always tell my students, if you need help, then find out the person who is doing well and who understands it, and reach out for that support. Don't be ashamed to ask for help. So, and Dr. Rose is not, she's a friend of Coppin. She has actually spoken to my research classes before, talking about quantitative analysis, but today she's going to be sharing with us about this really exciting qualitative project that I know she has so much fun with. And so I'm excited to hear about it in greater detail. So Dr. Theda Rose, I yield the virtual floor to you.
Thank you. And thank you all for inviting me to participate in this wonderful panel of experts. I will say I kind of probably started qualitative research a bit later. I'm more quantitatively trained, and the majority of the work I've done has been in a quantitative arena more than qualitative. But I also work with young people, youth, for a long, long time, and recognize the importance of youth voice well before I went into any kind of master's program or doctoral program. I was going to work with young people, and their voice was just something that was really important to capture. And so that's probably why I circled back to qualitative research once I got, kind of going with research in general. And so with that said, there's just some things that you, and my colleagues have kind of said this already, there's just some questions that you can't answer with quantitative research, right? And especially when you're trying to get a better understanding of the lived experiences of youth. And so my focus of research is completely young people, maybe a little bit going down usually adolescents. I've done some research on children and getting a little bit more into like the young adult ages, but I don't work with adults. I don't want to research adults. I don't care about adults, I'm kidding. My focus is really that kind of youth and young adult age range. And so, it's one of those things where you just recognize that the information that you want to create with them, you can't always do with a survey tool. I mean, they're important. And I think the research question guides the type of approach that you take. And so what I wanted to do in coming back into, quantitative research and kind of transitioning my mind to, okay, I really want to get a little bit more involved in how do I better understand adolescent development from the adolescent's perspective. And so I was introduced to this qualitative research method called photo voice. And one of my really good friends, this is her main method of research. That's all she does. Her dissertation was photo voice. Everything she does is photo voice. I've published with her 2 photo voice articles now. And so I thought it would be a great way, and it's a very unique way to engage people in research, particularly people who are harder to reach. And although adolescents may not be harder to reach depending, they're hard to engage sometimes in research. And so photo voice is a community-based participatory research method, would fall under phenomenology. And Dr. Rice and Jones, you can correct me if I go astray. But it is a community-based participatory research method. And it really asks a study participant, in this case, young people, to visually capture an idea, to visually capture their perspective. It's a strength-based technique, I would say, because it kind of provides autonomy to the participants who choose what pictures to take, which then shapes the dialogue and the conversations that you have about the data and the findings. One of the crucial components of photo voice is really advocacy to inform policy or change in programming or practice. And so when you give adolescents the opportunity to really create that or shape that, they really, step up to the plate, and these adolescents did. So just the kind of procedures we went through in this project. So this is a project with a high school in Brooklyn, Maryland. Every time I say Brooklyn, I think New York, because I'm from New York. As you can maybe hear, you may hear Jamaican and New York in here. I don't know what you hear, but there's a mix of Jamaican and New York. But Brooklyn, Maryland, we did with the high school. And we, so we collaborated with, he was actually a doctor at our school, but he was actually a director in a program in a high school in Brooklyn, Maryland. And I just had this idea. And what did I do? Because I was not qualitatively trained. And Dr. Burley just said, did you find other people? I found 2 experts in my school. And I said, I would like you to join me on this project, who did not work with youth, but they had their own ideas. And so we came together and came up with these kind of 3 general themes: coping, agency, and well-being. So when we kind of began this project, we went into the school, we talked to the director, and we proposed it to the principal. You have to go through, if you do any project in Baltimore City with youth, you have to go through the Baltimore City IRB, the Baltimore City Public Schools IRB. That alone is enough to scare you, but don't be scared of them. But we got approval and we moved forward. And so what we did, the first thing we did was we had an orientation with them. And the first thing the young people said was, why are you here? Who are you and why are you here? And rightly so, because they want to know, what are you going to do with this information? That was the next question we got. What are you all going to do with this? And so we had to, I was like, oh, wait, hi, how you doing? I've worked with young people before, but they were really like, kind of, because it's research, you say research, young people get like, what's this? You start thinking Baltimore City and research and how that all plays into the back of their minds. So we had an orientation with them. We discussed the research constructs, and which is coping, agency, and well-being. But what we did with them was we had them define what coping meant to them, agency meant to them, and well-being meant to them. Because although we had general ideas, again, if this is an exchange and we're doing this project together, we wanted them to shape the dialogue and the meaning of these constructs for themselves, because they had to then go take pictures. So we talked about picture taking. We talked about ethical and safety guidelines for photography. We were like, no selfies. Everybody and their mother likes taking selfies now. We're like, you cannot take selfies for this project. And you cannot photograph people selling anything illegal in the street. We had to give them specific guidelines. And we gave them disposable cameras, which is like real old school, because we can't assume that people have access to iPhones and different things the way they can take pictures. So we distributed cameras, and after with young people, again in research, it's parent assent, caregiver consent, and youth assent. And so then we went ahead. So they went ahead and took pictures of images that represented coping, agency, and well-being. They participated then in focus groups to discuss how their pictures reflected coping, agency, and well-being as they understood it. The focus groups were transcribed and analyzed thematically with the photographs. So all of that became data. The focus groups were data, and so were the pictures. So all of that became data. They discussed those pictures with us, and we had the focus group. There were 2 focus groups. So there were about 12 students in this project, and we did 2 focus groups initially, and then we did follow-up focus groups with them. So the research team analyzed the data. It was 3 of us, at least 3 of us on each transcript. We did not try to transcribe any of it ourselves. We sent that sucker to Rev, who took an online program. I wasn't even trying to get that experience. And then the students, after we analyzed the data, students then participated in a final focus group for member checking and deciding on final themes for presentation, plans for the presentation, and use of findings. So the purpose of the study, generally speaking, was to explore how coping, agency, and well-being are defined, perceived, and experienced by adolescents attending a Baltimore City high school. It was 12 students aged 15 to 17. 7 of them were identified as Black, and this was kind of consistent with the school's demographics. And so we found, and I can answer more questions about the process, but I want to be mindful of time. We found, this project ended up in 2 manuscripts or 2 publications. So there's 2 published articles on this project. One was on coping, because coping was a lot the young people really had a lot to say about coping. And so coping had 4 themes. One was defining coping. How do you deal with stuff? How do you deal with stuff? That's how the young people define coping. And then they talked about that. The second was coping resources. And so they described utilizing several resources to manage stress, including people, places, and activities. The third theme of coping was coping strategies. And here students distinguish between good and bad strategies. So like music versus drug use, something like that. And the last was this idea that really threaded throughout pretty much all the themes, which was evolution and consequences of coping. And what they were saying is that strategies change as you mature. So the way you deal with coping at 16 is going to change when you're 25. And they really had the foresight to think about that, which is why I love young people and their perspectives. For well-being, they kind of highlighted 3 different aspects of well-being: individual well-being, and one of the things, and it's a quote, they said, fixing your mind. And that was kind of how they perceived individual well-being, what they can do to help themselves feel better. Another aspect was community. So that was with friends and with others in the community. The last aspect of well-being they identified was where well-being is fostered. And school as a haven came up a lot for them. A lot of them were really connected to that particular high school and then really found a security in being a part of the school. And the last construct of agency, they kind of had some different ideas of agency. Now, agency was interesting because when you say agency, it's a young person, then they're not thinking like empowerment or, and other words that describe agency. And so they really had to define that for themselves because we could not put our definition on them. So they said agency can be used for good or bad. They defined agency as connected to action and change. And so they said it could be good or bad. They said it could impact themselves and others. And then they said that we are obligated to exercise agency. We are obligated, they were obligated, and they felt others were obligated to exercise agency to make change. And so that's one of the things that they really highlighted about agency. And so, the last part of the project was coming up with the boards, because we were going to do presentations. I'm going to show you pictures if I have time. Of the boards that we did. We got them professionally done from Alpha Graphics, which is all over, but in the Baltimore City. I don't think it's in Baltimore City anymore. I think that one closed, but we had Alpha Graphics make us these boards. And I'll show you in a second. And what they did was 4 exhibitions of the work. They had 2 exhibitions at their high school for the school community and for a high-ranking member of US Congress. I don't know who it was because I wasn't there. Because what happened is we made these boards and we made 2 sets and they just took the show on the road. They did presentations without us. And so, the third was at Baltimore City Public School Board meeting, which I went to, which went till 11 o'clock at night. But these young people were there and they presented to the school board about things that were important. They also came up with in their last focus group when they designed these boards. So they came up with where they wanted to present, how they wanted to present, what was going on the board. All of those pieces were them. We didn't pick anything for them and make any decisions around that for them. But they also, the last place they presented was at the University of Maryland School of Social Work. So we brought them to campus and we had a session where we had faculty and staff and students who wanted to come and participate and kind of hear about what the young people, talked about. And it was so interesting because what we didn't measure quantitatively was something like empowerment, which I would love to do, because some of these young people in the beginning were like, I don't want to present. I'll stay in the back, I'll make the flyer type of thing. And then they were the main ones at the board, because what happened in the presentations is that we'd set up the boards around the room. The young people would stand at the boards. I would introduce for maybe a minute what the project was about. Then people went to the boards and the young person was there, kind of like a poster presentation at a conference. The young person would explain all the things that were going on the board. We had nothing to, I don't even know what they said, but we had nothing to do with that. But they took ownership of it. And that's one of the values of qualitative research, is really they took ownership of the project. And so we were able to, strengthen collaborations with the Baltimore school community through this project, provide a forum for them to really express their thoughts and their perspectives. And again, we had research findings co-created with youth. So the last thing I wanted to show you, and I have to share my screen to do that, was just the boards. Do I have time for that? Okay. So let's see. Oops. Let me do this first. Okay. So it's a small picture because I took this years ago. This was the coping board. And this picture here in particular, so the boards and the manuscripts that we wrote are a bit different. One, we couldn't include all the pictures, and two, we had to think about how we talked about the themes in relation. The themes might have differed a little bit from their presentation. But this one here, like Gone But Not Forgotten, Never Forgotten, was a coping theme. And in the paper, we talked about how they gave examples of communal support and symbolic rituals as community resources. So for community resource for coping. So they chose these final pictures. Now we would have probably been like, this is too dark to put on a board, and whatever, but this is what they felt as a group. All 12 of them was at this last meeting, and they felt that these were the pictures that represented what they felt and what they believed. And so we let them pick anything, pick what they wanted. Not anything, but what they wanted. They come up with the captions. They came up with the title and the captions for all the pictures. And this is one of their presentation boards, the coping board. And so you see they have like Our Escape, Man's Best Friend. So this is what was important to them in terms of coping. So again, they're shaping or they're thinking about how this, and one of the things that they talked about in terms of the school, in terms of at the school level, was that they would prefer outside people come in and facilitate sessions around coping and developing coping skills with them. So that's one of the things that came out of that was really school related. So the second board was well-being. So here you see, I'm sorry, these seem so small, but you can see, hopefully. Here you see their thoughts about well-being. Interesting, it was interesting what they chose, right? Because this is the library. This is the fire department. We were like, oh, okay. But again, this is where they felt that, where they felt comfortable or safe, like safe havens for them. And it says safer than the police. I don't know if you can see that, but that is one of the things that they said was a caption for this. This picture here, I would say is, we framed this picture for the school social worker at the school, was really, really helpful in helping us recruit kids. And this picture is in our paper, and this represented well-being to them. It's a picture of a group of friends from the school. Now, we told them they couldn't have facial shots in here, right? So they got creative. I don't know who took the picture, and they turned their backs to the picture and they took the picture. I was like, okay, I got y'all. It was a great, beautiful picture though, because it really reflected for them family and coming together and a safe haven for them. And so this is one of our kind of our favorite pictures, but these 5 pictures for them, including the high school, so now you see the high school, but including the high school, really represented like a safe haven and well-being for them. And then the last one was agency, and you'll see that there was a lot that they really, went around Baltimore City and they took pictures that they felt of things that they could change or things that needed change. And you could see a lot of it is related to things that were broken. They call this No Love in the Hood. I mean, they captured all of this and created all of these, washing away the crime in Baltimore, lost home. And this was one of the pictures in one of our publications as well. Most of the students, what they wanted to see and change was that revolved around their neighborhood environment. Vacant lots, boarded up buildings. They made suggestions about how these buildings could be centers for after school programs for kids and that type of thing. And so this was kind of, to them, this reflected lost home, or was one of the things that reflected agency or something that they could change or others should be obligated to change. So that was the last picture, so I'll stop sharing. And so, yeah, and so then, as I mentioned, after the project was over, we had 2 articles published in journals about the paper. So if anyone is ever interested in reading one, you can find it, but which gives a lot more information than I'm sharing here. But it was really exciting because for me, who would work with young people for a long time, when you get to a professor level, if you're not doing research all the time, it was great to reconnect with young people. They actually thought it was, a project, a program in the school. They were like, when are you coming back to do another program? They didn't even think about it as a research project. They thought about it as a program because they were so involved and took ownership of it. They really were, really wanted to be a part of it. So I'll stop there and I'll take questions at the end when we have Q&A. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Was that good, y'all? Okay, I see the hands shaking, thumbs going up. Yes, that was so great, Dr. Rose. And we're gonna take some questions at the end, but Shamia, along with myself, we would like a copy of the article. So if you send us a copy of the article or both of them, I'll make sure to share it with everyone. So thank you so much. I was taking notes. I know y'all think we don't take notes. We were taking notes. Ashley said, thank you, very interesting. Just fascinating. We're so excited. This is good stuff. So I'm gonna keep going. Y'all not gonna be talking about me like they were talking about Steve Harvey last night in the versus battle. They said he was talking too much. You saw it, Krishan? So let me not talk too much. And let me bring to the stage our very own, the one and only, our fitness champion. Hold up, wait, let me find, I gotta do the spotlight. Dr. Jones got me all obsessed with the spotlight action over here. Yeah. Oh, come on, get Dr. Rose, absolutely fascinating. Great to conduct research that amplifies the voice of our youth. Let me pay attention before I end the whole meeting. All right, there she is, y'all. The fitness guru, the Black Panther of the university, another Jamaican queen. I can't believe she does not have on a dashiki or something today. But we are so, and this is our fitness guru. I know, pump her up. She will hurt us. We are so excited, and this is none other than the one and only Dr. Burley, psych, Dr. Buckley. Because do they call you Dr. Burley?
They do. It's funny.
And they call me Dr. Buckley. I just answer now. I'm like, hey, it's a great person to be mistaken for. You know, sometimes you want to correct that real quick, but I'm okay. I'm okay with the mistake. So thank you and welcome. As they say, we save the best for last, right? So I got caught up. Let me read your bio. Okay. Oh, the dean, just in time. All right. Welcome, Dean O'Brien. We see you just came in. Dr. Beverly O'Brien, the Dean of the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences, logged on just in time to hear Dr. Buckley. All right, so Dr. Buckley, most of us know Dr. Buckley here, but she has her BA in social work from Oakwood University. So we have another Oakwood graduate. Also, she got her Master of Science in Social Work from the University of Alabama. I'm an Auburn graduate, but you know, that's War Eagle. All right, all this Alabama stuff going on. And she received her PhD from Morgan State University here in Baltimore. Dr. Buckley, y'all already know she does everything. She's been a previous director of field education. She's taught at several schools, not only in Maryland, but in Alabama, a really well-known HBCU in Alabama, Miles College. She's taught at Washington Adventist University here in Maryland. She's taught in Canada. Like, what other continent? Have you been on some other continent teaching? Not yet, I'm sure it's coming. She has been a foster care social worker, a therapist, a clinical director of a program for grieving children. She's serves on various boards of directors. She founded a nonprofit organization for at-risk adolescent girls. You and Dr. Rose have something. Dr. Rose didn't mention it, but she also co-founded an organization back up in New York for girls. I'm not going to butcher the name. It was Savvy or something like that, I believe, right? Some kind of program for girls. So you all have that in common. I didn't know this, Dr. Buckley, a foster parent for teenage mothers and their babies. Okay, let me get you some masks and you can come get mine for a while. Give me a break. All right. So that is pretty amazing. That's some good stuff. She has a keen interest in researching the emerging social trends impacting the Black family dynamic, in addition to researching grieving and minority groups. So Dr. Buckley is amazing, and we're so glad to have her share with us about her qualitative research. I saw Dr. Roden Trader, the chair of the Department of Criminal Justice. Welcome, Dr. Roden Trader. And I just can't help but say it. another member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Um, yes, yes. So welcome, Dr. Roten Trader, to the session. And we are going to now turn the virtual stage over to you, Dr. Buckley. We can't wait to hear about your qualitative research. I've heard about it before, so y'all gonna really love it. It was some good stuff. So thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Burley, and I'm happy to be here. Dr. Rose, when you were talking, I want to say it was within your first 3 words. I was like, Whitney, she's Jamaican. And I sent Dr. Burley a message. I said, she's Jamaican, isn't she? So it's good to meet you. I've heard about you, so it's good to meet you in this space. All right. Quick question for folks in this meeting today. Has anybody ever been curious about somebody else's business? Be honest. Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Gilliam said no.
I said no. I said all the time.
I mean, we are just curious about people and why they do the things that they do. And sometimes that curiosity comes from within ourselves. That sometimes there are things in others that pique our interest. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why I ended up becoming a qualitative researcher. I didn't know back in the day that I was a qualitative researcher, but I understand it and I embrace it fully now. Exactly, Dr. Gilliam. We stay in people's business. That's what we do. I will be very transparent though and say that while I was pursuing my PhD, we were required to take 3 quantitative stats courses, and I knew that was not my ministry. And so I said, let me just go on and get these 3 classes and keep it pushing. And if I ever needed to do a quantitative research in the future, I knew that I'd be able to partner with somebody else. And I mean, I'm laughing as I'm saying that, but again, this is something that I embrace about myself. It's not a limitation. It's just that I thrive as a qualitative researcher. And so while I was identifying or narrowing down rather what I was going to research, I remember that I was told you really shouldn't research something that is too closely related to your own life. And that's some people's school of thought. And then others feel like, well, it's actually a good thing to research something that you can relate to, because you in essence, not only are you the researcher, but you're also like a quasi participant. So I'm just saying that to give you some additional things to think about as you consider, the type of researcher that you will become, or rather, the type of researcher that you are currently. So when Dr. Burley was reading my bio, yes, I do have a strong passion and keen interest in grief, especially how Black people grieve. But as life would have it, my research has really emerged, and it's not just focused on grief. And so my umbrella is, even though I hate the word, but my research umbrella is trauma. And so I look at different types of traumatic life experiences. But for my research that I'll be talking about today, I explored fatherless woman syndrome and the perceptions of attachment on Jamaican women. The reason why I chose Jamaican women was because initially I thought that there would have been an overwhelming response because of my preconceived notions of this idea of fatherlessness. I just assumed that there would be a whole bunch of women who were fatherless, who needed to be a part of the research. Now, looking back on that in retrospect, I'm so glad that I, cleaned up my biases and have a better understanding of fathers, fatherhood, father involvement, fatherlessness, and all of the things. There is a very popular misconception that Black fathers are absent and that they are not good fathers and stuff like that. And my research has really, really, really just brought me to a place of clarity around that. I'm not saying, let me be clear, I'm not saying that there aren't absent Black fathers. Of course there are. But the narrative, oftentimes when we are talking about Black lived experiences, you will find that it comes from a pathological lens. And I fundamentally reject notions such as that because I am a strengths-based researcher and practitioner. And I believe that while it is imperative that we do tell the truth about our experiences, the truth isn't always steeped in negativity and pathology. So, having said that, I'll just share my quick, I'll share my little PowerPoint. Since everybody else had a little PowerPoint, I'm gonna share mine too. Here we go. Not that. Okay, here we go. Now, those who have had me in class know that I always struggle with technology. I'm like, wait, how do I do this? What's the next step? Okay, so here we go. So the problem that I was interested in was fatherlessness, which is defined, for my study, it's defined as not having a father present in the home or in their life from and during their formative years. And this fatherlessness was not related to death. It was not related to incarceration. It was absenteeism in its truest form, if you will. And so what I found was that fatherlessness contributes to several maladaptive behaviors, including suicide, high risk sexual behaviors, poor educational performance, emotional difficulties, such and so forth. One thing that I found was that women in particular who grew up without a father are labeled as having daddy issues. So, at the beginning of this, I mentioned pathology. Well, that's a way that women have been pathologized, because when you label the person who has, through no doing of her own, who has been subjected to a particular condition, when you label her in this way, what you're saying is that she's broken. Something is wrong with her. Well, sure, she grew up without a father, but we should not pathologize her, because that actually really reinforces the trauma that she has been subjected to. So the attachment styles that I explored were, as you can see on the screen here, secure attachment, anxious, dismissive, insecure, ambivalent, and insecure, avoidant. And what you find from these different types of attachments is that it's on a spectrum, if you will, with secure being the ideal, the most so-called healthy form of attachment, where that individual is secure in themselves as well as in the relationships that they have with others, and those types of attachments. The insecure, ambivalent, and insecure avoidant, as you can imagine, those are more dysfunctional, because there are some insecurities that the individual experiences because of relationships. And let me be clear, the relationships are not just romantic. These can be platonic. They can certainly be professional. It can be any type of a relationship or connection where some sort of an attachment would take place, attachment rather. But again, these four attachment styles give us the framework for attachment. All right, I want to jump forward. So the methodology that I use, I am a phenomenological researcher, but the specific type that I use is called interpretive phenomenological analysis. It's about getting into people's business, really going after the insider's perspective, and really trying to see their lived experience through their own, through their lens, through their eyes, really doing a lot of listening, active listening. And as social workers, we claim to be good at active listening skills. And that's where you get the meat of the lived experience. For my research, I had 14 participants. Now that's important because if you recall, Dr. Jones shared that he had 9. And 9 is a great number. My dissertation chair, she actually did not think that and I didn't even expect to get 14. I expected to get 10 to 12. And she said, you're never going to get more than that because your your potential demographic is so narrow, since I was only looking at Jamaican women. But I ended up not only getting these 14, but I got other women, not just Black women either. You know, I put my recruitment tool out on social media, and it got out by word of mouth. Women wanted to tell their story. I will also point out that those that responded that did not meet the criteria, they were not just interested in telling their stories because of absenteeism, but they wanted to talk about how the death of their father impacted them, or their father's incarceration, or how the maladaptive or the broken relationship between their parents, which contributed to the fatherlessness, how that affected them. So this fatherhood involved, or father involvement and fatherhood research, it is such a dynamic and yet very complicated area of research, one that is largely underexplored. So these are just the demographics. You'll see here that the participants ranged in age from 24 to 55. That is a very wide range. And what that says is that regardless of the individual's age, the likelihood is that they have some things that they want to share and discuss with respect to their father relationship. Varied marital statuses. Some of them had their own children, some did not. They lived in Canada, Jamaica, the US, and two of them actually never left Jamaica. They were still living in Jamaica at the time of the study. So I'll stop sharing now because the rest of this stuff is kind of boring. I do want to share this though, as far as the participants. Many times with research, you will find that there is an incentive for participating. And so I gave my participants a $25 Victoria's Secrets gift card. I did that because they were women, and I figured they might like bras and panties and other things. So, you know, hey, or go get you some perfume. But I wanted to give them something that might have been appreciated, and not just, I mean, Dr. Burley loves Amazon. Most people like Amazon, but I wanted it to be something that potentially would have nurtured them in a very special way and made them feel really appreciated for participating in such a personal and important research. My themes that emerged from my study were, of course, around the attachment. I found like there was a lot of repetition around the struggles that the participants experienced in terms of their ability to form attachments. It didn't mean that they did not form attachments. And again, keep in mind that the attachments were not just romantic. It was all different kinds of attachments. I remember one of my participants in particular shared that she consistently experienced difficulty forming attachments with at work, in particular with those who were in positions of authority. And so from her perspective, she felt that that was related to her father absence, because she felt that his absence did not help to ground her in supervisory types of relationships. And so she found that she would oftentimes be in these really combative types of situations. Yet she didn't experience that with her mother. What else can I share with you here? So in terms of bias, because as a researcher, you do need to peel back the layers on the potential for bias. So one of the things that I found was that after I did the interviews, the very first two interviews, I was, well, let me just share the screen so you can see what I wrote. It's kind of funny, in my opinion, as I look back at it. Share screen here. So I said, and this was, so a part of interpretive phenomenological is that you are supposed to journal. And so these are literally from my journal entries. I said, so I've had the two interviews transcribed, and the others spoke about transcriptions. Listen, if I didn't transcribe, I would still be in school today. Okay, because the interviews were lengthy, but also just as you are replaying and it's just a lot to try to transcribe on your own. So I too paid the money to get my research transcribed, my data transcribed. So anyway, so I said, so I've had the 2 interviews transcribed, and the high that I felt when I started recruitment has completely dissipated. I'm looking at the transcriptions and I'm confused as to how to take this to the next level. Imposter syndrome is kicking my ass. In that moment, I just felt like I can't do this. This is bigger than me. It's beyond me. I suck. But of course, you know, I was able to push through with the support of my dissertation committee and friends and support systems as well. Another important thing, I said in analyzing one of my participants' interviews, she said in response to one of the questions, she said, "I wish I had a dad." Yeah, I had daddy issues. Oh God, I had daddy issues. And that made me tear up because I guess I did also. And if the truth be told, I still do. One of the limitations from my study was that it was only conducted on Jamaican women. So it's a limitation, even though I knew that going in, but it also is an implication for a future study because I knew that I would want to replicate this study with other demographics, other women, maybe other groups of Caribbean women, maybe just Black American women, maybe just Black Canadians, you know, whatever. But I knew that while it was a limitation, it also had the potential to be an implication for future study. Also, this study does have very strong implications for feminist or womanist therapy, which is becoming a new and an emerging trend in terms of mental health treatment. So really wanting for mental health practitioners to understand the role of this fatherhood dynamic in women who grew up without a father and empowering them to be able to incorporate that knowledge into their therapeutic practices. So here is me and my dad. I met my dad for the first time. I met him when I was a kid, and then I met him again when I was 31, something like that. So I was grown. But this picture was taken in 2016 or 17, something like that, when I was in Jamaica. And it was such an important visit with my father. I didn't know it at the time, but it was going to help me as I continued with my research. You remember I said at the beginning of this that some people will say you should not research something that is too personal, while others would say the opposite. This is my evidence that for me, researching a topic that was and is very personal to me actually did help. It gave me the bravery to approach this. It gave me a tremendous amount of respect for women and men who do tell their stories of fatherlessness and who are able to engage in the work of healing from the traumatic experience of fatherlessness. That's it.
Wow. Wow spelled backwards, as one of my friends would say. That was so great, Dr. Buckley, so powerful.
So moving.
As people are saying in the chat as well. And so we have some questions in the chat, but before we get to the questions in the chat, we're gonna move immediately to our panel discussion. And let me, I'm gonna actually turn it over to Dr. Anderson because we have some questions for the panel, and then we'll take questions from the audience as well. So we'll start with the panel discussion, and let me bring our amazing speakers back to the stage. And Dr. Anderson, I will yield to you to facilitate our panel discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Burley, and thank you again so much to our panelists. And again, I will try and move through this portion expeditiously, still, of course, leaving time for your insights, your very valuable insights, so that we can have time for a student Q&A at the end of today. So the first question that I would love y'all's thoughts on is, what do you see as the overall value of qualitative research?
Well, thank you, Dr. Anderson. I would say in this time of social upheaval and COVID, there's opportunities to conduct qualitative research to really understand the impact of certain issues. So for instance, we may hear in the media that there are incidents of lack of access to care on the health side. We may hear that there are disparities in the criminal justice system, and COVID has only amplified those disparities. And so I think qualitative research, so I can imagine going into the prison and actually interviewing those offenders who are there and getting insight about their experience related to COVID, be it in-depth interviews or focus groups, could give a lot of insight to the numbers that we see. So it's one thing to say that this many offenders died in custody as a result of contracting COVID, but it's another thing to be able to put those numbers in context to understand their experience as to what contributed to that and how they perceived or what type of meaning came out of their experience while dealing with not only incarceration, but also COVID. I think it's a great time for voices around injustice conducted through autoethnography, experiences of the researcher and their voice present, or more objective qualitative research where it's very somewhat structured and objective. And so my perspective is that now is an exciting time. If I'm a student, it's an exciting time to try to get a better understanding of the social forces and phenomena that are affecting our society politically, criminal justice side, socially. It's just a great time to hear the voices of the people through research, through qualitative research.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. And you bring up an excellent point too with COVID and understanding people's experience during the COVID era. And one thing that I would ask our panel, in addition to their view on the overall value of doing qualitative research, is their thoughts on how to conduct qualitative research in this virtual modality, given what is going on with COVID. Hopefully, we are moving, towards more face-to-face interaction. But what is y'all's thoughts on how we do this, type of research that does often depend on a close personal, interaction, observation? What do y'all think about that?
We have so many tools now. COVID-19 has really exposed, it pushed us to use technology. Many of us are afraid of technology. Technology is our friend. Zoom, the platform we're on now, we can do a face-to-face interview with Zoom. Our participants can have a phone, it can be recorded, and Zoom transcribes for you. So you don't have to pay extra. And so Zoom is just one example, this platform of how we conduct research during COVID-19 or its convenience for our participants as well as our researchers.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Definitely Zoom is a lifesaver during this time for sure. Yeah.
I think it also gives us an opportunity to be creative. Because Melissa, you were saying some of your participants were still in Jamaica. And so, even though research has been going on, I've been interviewed as a part of research and was in Michigan. So it's not so much new. I think we just depended on the face-to-face. And I think what COVID did was give an opportunity to think creatively about how we could make research, continue to do research. I think it's challenging to some degree. I think with my research, I've done more focus groups with youth, and that's a little probably a bit harder because I teach too, so I got students on Zoom that are participating or engaged, and you got 13, 14-year-olds looking at me, whatever. They would be doing it in the room, but it's harder to do kind of the group, and then youth have to have parent consent or caregiver consent as well, so they can't just get on here and give consent. So there's some things, but I think there's creative ways to work around it. I haven't done it, I haven't tried it. I may have to, depending on where things go. But I think it's really forcing us to be a bit more creative in our thinking. and just really, like, as Dr. Jones said, using the tools that are available to see how we could, really, for convenience sake, even, people, they may have traveling issues, may not be able to get to wherever you're going to meet them for an interview, depending. So I think it's really opened our eyes to see what we can really do creatively.
Yeah, it does. It opens up, yeah, for sure, new pathways. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say I agree with that completely. I think that one thing that COVID has taught us is that just because somebody said that it can't be done doesn't mean that it can't be done. And quite frankly, I do wish that I understood video platforms, because if I did, then I would have used one of them to conduct my interviews. It's so interesting because the two participants who live in Jamaica, I interviewed them using WhatsApp. And WhatsApp does have the video call capability, but I didn't use that, right? Because it wasn't the custom. It wasn't preferred to conduct the interviews that way. But if you're looking at establishing rapport and creating a safe space, some people might actually prefer to be able to see the person who is asking them these very personal questions versus just having a telephone conversation. So that's my perspective on it.
No, I think that's fascinating that it does. This time, as hard as it is, it opens up new opportunities in research, even in qualitative research, which we may not have thought of before. I'm just curious, do y'all have plans to use this type of technology in your current research agenda right now?
100%. And I'm going to be using Dr. Rose's too, because I like pictures.
Yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, just to switch gears, and I'm not trying to rush all, but I definitely want to leave time for our students to ask y'all questions because I know that they have them. One question that I do have is on generalizability, because that can often be a criticism of qualitative research, that, or at least that maybe it's a drawback of this type of research. What would y'all say as our panelists to this criticism?
Well, I would kind of add this perspective to this. And indeed, even with qualitative research, and not to go down a rabbit's hole, but, there's almost a movement to even make qualitative research quantitative research. So it's just the way things are going is very interesting as you explore it. But what I will say is that oftentimes qualitative research is the ground floor for the identification of new and emerging phenomena. So if you think of from this perspective, just, there were certain periods in time where certain offenses weren't yet defined. And as certain offenses were occurring in the community, you may have policymakers, advocates that work in the community around violence prevention, intervention, feminists, civil rights leaders, and others. They may be looking at a broader historic challenge, such as murder, but then there's the recognition that there is murder of women. And then not only is there murder of women, this is the 1970s, but there's a recognition that this just isn't normal murder. This is murder amongst male and female intimate partners. And so you would have, if you look at the research, focus groups or interviews with those victims of domestic violence. Some of that research then lends to large-scale studies to try to get an understanding from a quantitative level, the broadness or the breadth of the actual phenomena or problem. But the first steps usually are when something may be not as popular, not on the radar, or there's lots of pieces there, but the pieces haven't been pulled together in a meaningful way to say, hold up, this just isn't kidnapping here. This is something different. This looks more like potential trafficking. There's business enterprise. There's a certain thing about this phenomena that we need to study more that is different than just kidnapping. And so you will have qualitative studies that start to look at what are the experiences of individuals who are part of human trafficking. And then you have more qualitative studies, focus groups, in-depth interviews in certain areas, depending upon your field, that can then grow and emerge to lead to more prominent studies. So to make my long story short, there are qualitative research, while not generalizable because of the numbers, it can often provide the framework in which generalizable studies are later fostered and birthed. And so you can't discount it, because in some instances, there will be no generalizable broad scale studies if there isn't first that spark to know that there's a unique phenomena even to explore.
I just want to really quickly piggyback on that. I completely agree. Two things. So from my perspective, just like in social work, we say, and we just talked about this today in class, as a matter of fact, practice informs policy, policy informs practice. I see the same type of dynamic with qualitative and quantitative research. They go hand in hand. It's not one or the other, and so I think that we, as more contemporary researchers, need to be more savvy, and recognize how we can marry these two types of methodologies. And like I said earlier, while I know that I am not a quantitative researcher, I know what it would take to get a quantitative researcher to join my study. Thus making it into a mixed methods. There's a researcher that I quoted, and I had to look it up, but Poltz and Hungler said that the word generalizability is defined as the degree to which findings can be generalized, but partial generalizations may be possible for similar populations. And I feel that this should not be a primary concern of qualitative research. I agree 100%. You cannot only focus on this so-called generalizability, because again, we are looking at lived experiences. This may be generalizable for a small segment of the population, but that's not the sole purpose and emphasis of qualitative research.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think lived experiences, I think that's so key. And the idea of marrying these methodologies and that they're not working at cross purposes. I think that is absolutely key. And an additional question is just asking y'all where y'all are going from here in terms of your qualitative research agendas. Anything that you're looking at in the future that you can announce today, something of interest in the field?
Just continue in the journey. I would love to be like these authors right here. My favorite authors, Dr. Morris Pushout, qualitative researcher, as well as Isabel Wilkerson. All these are books that you may have heard of, may be exposed to, but they are qualitative research. So one day I aspire to be like one of them, where I can take my research and create it where everyone have access to it, not just in the journal articles. So that's what I aspire to.
One day I aspire to be able to do that on my Zoom screen. How you do that? How you put them books up there like that?
Can I just
answer it? It's one word: ECAM. I told you, Dr. Rice, this is what I was telling about.
I told you all earlier, with that grin he had tricks up his sleeve. So I'm recommending the book, but see, this is what you call old school. There's no pop-up. This is what you call manual qualitative. I would just add that that there are two projects that Team CJ that's affiliated with, or the Bishop L. Robinson Senior Justice Institute. One, the Quality Education Minorities Forum out of DC on the campus of Howard University. They have provided support to Team CJ in a learning cohort that centers on how to improve curriculum in our delinquency, improve our delinquency curriculum in our criminal justice program. And so we recently had a online virtual subject matter experts roundtable. That was phase 2. Phase 1, we asked targeted questions to our students concerning their participation in our delinquency capstone course. So we have essays that we're going to analyze in code and look for themes such as Dr. Jones highlighted in his presentation. And then we're also going to ask similar questions to our subject matter experts that are connected to COPPIN and work in various fields of criminal justice. We're going to transcribe and analyze that data. And we're looking at taking the data and learning from it so that we can use it to support our students in entering a criminal justice system that has a lot of problems, but a criminal justice system in which they can be prepared to enter with a reform advocacy mindset. And the other project that I highlighted on the slide was the Thurgood Marshall College Fund Gun Violence Research Project, and that will involve, with Coppin, interviewing 150 Black males between the age of 15 to 24 to get more insight about factors that influence their gun possession, in-depth qualitative interviews, virtual and on-site. And so that's what is in my ballywick, as they say. And I'm excited to work with students to advance those efforts and to work with faculty to on the other projects. So we're excited, a lot of ideas, you know, research is exciting. And, you know, if you spoke to the old me 20 years ago, I would be laughing at me right now.
I don't know if I can follow that, but I am working on focus groups with youth around mental well-being. So my research really focuses on how we define and conceptualize mental health from more of an asset-based versus a deficit perspective. So I actually use the term mental well-being. And so I did some focus groups with youth, but we needed to do more to reach saturation, and COVID and a lot of stuff kind of stood in the way. And it was really interesting because the groups that we did were very interesting about how young people, when you say mental health, what it means, when you say mental well-being or positive mental health and mentally healthy, what it means, they came up with these great ideas about, they just had some really great perspectives. But part of that really stems from a project where we see that, you know, when you say mental health, most people think depression, anxiety, and what, you know, and all schizophrenia. They were like crazy, you know, youth are gonna say whatever comes out their mouth. But you know, and so that perspective and the fact that all the definitions of mental health that are more asset-based are developed by the World Health Organization, et cetera. But if you're applying them to young people, then we need to really think about what that means for young people. And there's really not much about how young people inform those types of definitions and constructs. So I'm working on that now, and I also have a grant right now that's going to end next year, and I hope to apply for another grant and do kind of mixed methods, probably incorporate photo voice. I'm trying to get it in everywhere, photo voice study. The study now is that it's R03, it's an NIH study, a small secondary analysis study. So that's my quantitative self that looks at stress and depression on educational outcomes of Black youth, and the Black youth include African-American, Caribbean Black youth, and how these developmental assets can moderate or mediate those relationships. But really what I would love to do is collect data and ask them, because again, when you're using secondary data, and the other positive thing about qualitative research and your own research, but qualitative research, you can get more information about what that means. And so I would like to conduct a study that uses mixed methods approach to really better understand kind of how these assets really, what they look like for young people and how they really help them. Like what, you have two young people next to each other, what helps one person get to this place and that place, and they're coming from the same backgrounds, et cetera. And what are their strengths, but in terms of how they define those strengths. So that would be another step that I'm going towards next year, maybe.
Wonderful. That sounds amazing too.
I had a question. I'm going to reserve my question though after the students. If we want to, are we ready to move to the students? I know we've been asking, people have been putting questions in the chat. This is so good. I'm ready to go do some more research. Can I get a course release? I see the dean is on. We'll ask her afterwards. So there's some questions in the chat we want to give the students, and you all, I'm gonna just speak. Someone mentioned about incentives, but Dr. Rice, the speakers have been facilitating questions in the chat, so maybe it's all a moot point here. So if anyone wants to come off, Dr. Rose sent me the article and I'm gonna send it out. I'll Slack it to you all after we get off of here.
I was just going to speak to
Oh.
Easter, and I put it in the chat, but we plan to recruit from trusted organizations that already work with the population. So for example, Roca Baltimore will outreach to them. We'll outreach to Safe Street, Youth Opportunity Centers, Uncle T, Challenge to Change. So we're gonna reach, and also more formal entities. You have Volunteers of America, parole and probation officers. We're going to work with a consultant as well as stakeholders in the community that we have pre-established relationships with to get their buy-in and support around this effort. And then we hopefully will be able to recruit from their respective sites. And those sites will also assist us in the coordination of the virtual as well as on-site interviews that are conducted. And we hope the $25 incentive will be move participants to want to participate and contribute in the research.
Can you all, thank you so much, Dr. Rice. That's so incentives are very helpful. And I like what Dr. Buckley mentioned earlier about Victoria's Secret gift cards. So even being more thoughtful about what populations may desire instead of what we think they want. So one question that kind of follows along what Easter was asking about consent. And I know Dr. Rose mentioned about assent. I don't know if any of you can, either of you speak about that further. You know, when we're dealing with youth, there's assent, and then we also have consent. So there are two different levels of that consenting process when we're dealing with adolescents. So can someone speak to that to clarify the differences?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, for youth under a certain age, they're technically not able to consent to be a part of a research study without parent or guardian permission, so to speak. So typically when you develop a study with youth, you have to develop a caregiver consent. Let me get the right words, caregiver consent, and then an assent that they sign. So the caregiver consent gives them consent to participate in the study. So when I've done this with youth, they had to have caregiver consent to come to the orientation, the first focus group, et cetera. At the first group or at the first meeting with them, they then signed assent form saying that they also agree to participate in the study. So the parents or guardians gave them permission, and then they also should say, because that's then you have to go through the assent form with them, because that's then saying that they understand what they're participating in, that they're voluntarily participating. They understand that they can leave the study at any time, similar to the consent, but they're giving their own permission, so to speak, to participate in the study. They're giving their okay. So you need both of them when you have, I think it's under, I mean, it's weird, I don't work with kids over 18 that much. I think it's under 18 is the age that you have to have consent. So for research study. So that's kind of how that process works. So you need both for youth under 18.
Which is important, particularly when you start talking about incentives being offered, because you don't want to have young people being compelled or coerced to participate in a research study because their parents or their guardian is trying to nudge them into it.
Yeah, and usually there are caps that are set on certain incentives depending, so there's certain federal guidelines, but for like the youth in the photo, like a $10, no, they got a photo album or whatever that was like $10, or whatever. That's how we estimated the cost. To say they picked some of their favorite photographs from the study and they kept them. For youth that were in my focus groups, we gave them like a gift card to Subway. So one of the things we wanted to do was use community resources, and that school was located near Subway. I think the Subway is now closed. And we asked the school and we asked the students, but we asked the school as well, like what was the good thing to give them. So we didn't kind of go in with, we're just gonna give them $10 Amazon. They were like, oh, half of them go to Subway for school, for dinner, for whatever. And it was in the community. And so it was like a $10 gift. So that's kind of been the range for youth. But I mean, for adults, it's different. I know we've been in studies that it's $50 to Safeway or whatever. So I think it ranges, but yeah, you want to make sure they kind of, on this, there's this line of when does it become like your, what is that word? Going beyond, like, kind of not forcing them to participate, but you want to just make sure it's a number that, or it's an incentive, but it doesn't, make them feel like they have to participate or should participate.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a question. I'm just recognizing our time here. We have a question from Krishan and then Dr. Gilliam. And Dr. Gilliam, I'm gonna put you after Jason. So Krishan, Jason, and then Dr. Gilliam if we don't have any other student questions. Krishan, you can unmute and share.
Okay. But first, I want to say thank you for providing us with such a wealth of information. I actually have two questions, Dr. Burley, if I can. So,
I was giving thumbs up. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sure.
All right, thank you. So my first question is specifically for Dr. Buckley. I do believe, well, your research is very, very interesting. And I wanted to know, like, on a personal level, how were you able to separate your personal emotions from the actual research? Because it is a tough one, and it's one that hits home to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. There were times that I was not able to separate myself. I can remember one day in particular, after conducting one interview, I threw myself into the bed and wept. And I mean, I had to go through that. And I think, quite frankly, because I am, like many of us here, I'm very empathetic. So even if it wasn't my lived experience, based on the stories that were being shared, I probably still would have thrown myself into the bed and wept. So I think that the key isn't so much that it had an emotional impact, but it was, how did I deal? How did I deal with that? Our code of ethics cautions us against being impaired when doing work. And, the impairment isn't just about drugs and alcohol, it's about emotional impairment. So when I had that reaction, I knew that I needed to step back from collecting data and I needed to journal what I was experiencing. That's the best and most truthful answer that I can give you. Thank you for that.
Thank you for your answer. And then the second question, and this is open. So how do you know when you had, what determines the point where you have enough data to start drawing your conclusion? Like, I know there isn't a cap on how many participants you can have, but like, how do you judge that?
It's a good question. For my study, when I interviewed my participants, when I kept getting the same data over and over again, we call it saturation. And once that happens, and you also have a team, you're not by yourself. You have researchers who look over the data as well to make sure to assist with rigor. So when you get the data and it's saying the same thing over and over, and no new information emerges, that's a point where you can look at your research team and say, are we reaching saturation? Because saturation is to the point where we have reached our potential for that process.
Thank you for that.
I would also just add to that, another point to keep in mind is also the viability of the study that you're trying to carry out. Do you have the manpower, the woman power, the resources, right, to actually carry it out? And so, let's say, for example, the gun violence study that I mentioned, we're receiving funds and resources to conduct that. Even the Quality Education Minority Forum study, we received some resources to support the purchase of software, to support the work. And so if you're funded, that may also, even if it's qualitative research, it may expand the opportunity to be able to include a larger sample. But if you have limited resources, be it time, personnel, that may also impact the type of sample, the size of the sample, and opportunities to replicate the study. So for instance, with limited resources, you may do one focus group of 9 to 12 people. With a lot of resources, you may be able to do multiple across different regions. or across the city. So I think resources also and the viability of your study based on those resources is important.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to let Jason Hambade ask his question, and then we are going to have to move to close.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank everybody for presenting. That was like some awesome stuff. I was trying to take a lot of that in. Well, one of the questions was, I didn't hear anybody talk about mixed methods as a technique, but I saw in the chat, Dr. Trader had mentioned it, and then a couple other doctors had gave feedback on that. But I wanted to ask Dr. Rose, because when you was giving your opening comments about the research project, you mentioned the word research, and the children or the youth responded like, research, what are you going to do with this research? So my question really is, because I know this generation, current generation that we're in, have a access, to the world through the internet. And when I was young, we didn't have that access. So I wanted to know if the young people have, is that a form of paranoia, or is it because they are privy to information about the things that has happened in Baltimore with the Kennedy Krieger project, the John Hopkins Research Project, all these negative projects?
I think it's a combination of things. I think teenagers are suspicious of adults they don't know. And so when you come into the school, they don't know us. So we were introduced to them by someone who worked at the school, but you have 3 people come in, one Black and two Black colleagues and one white colleague from University of Maryland. I will tell you that I've done projects elsewhere, and parents didn't let the young people participate because they said, we don't trust University of Maryland. And so there's just this stigma attached to research in Maryland. And I don't know, I'm not saying what schools, I have no, I don't know that level of information, but I think these young people were like suspicious. We're adults, they don't know. They're here to talk to us about something. What is it they really want to know, and why do they want to know it? And I was really thankful for those questions, to be honest, because I think when they really understand what we were trying to propose to them, and they could have said no, they didn't have to participate, they could have, but then keep the framing in a way that it empowers them. It's so that they take ownership of that research, which is what they ended up doing. That's why I was saying they saw it as a program in the school at the end of it. So yeah, they were suspicious of adults they don't know, coming in and introducing ourselves, as we're from University of Maryland School of Social Work, blah, blah, blah. And so I think that was a big part of it. Yes, they may have some experience and knowledge about those issues in Baltimore. I'm not 100% sure how much that's taught in high school. I teach MSW students who don't know about even Tuskegee. So that surprises me, but you never know. So yeah, so it could be some of that, but also I think it's just, they didn't know who we were.
Okay, you mentioned 2 other things. You mentioned REM and you mentioned alpha graphics.
I mentioned, Rev. I'm so, okay. Yeah,
Rev is it Rev or REM?
Rev, R-E-V. It's an online transcription service. So you send them your transcript, you send them your audio tape, and they transcribe it and email it back to you. So it's an online transcription service that's really, like, you can get it back within 24 hours.
Okay.
You also always, though, I would say you have to check those things, because when we were going through the transcripts, we were like, what word is that? Because no one said that. So you really have to check them. Rev was one. Alpha Graphics is a graphics organization. It's called Alpha Graphics. If you Google it, they have a lot of sites in Maryland. They helped us produce those boards, those presentation boards. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I had that when they were transcribing some of my data, because as you can imagine, one of the things, so in terms of cultural competency, data transcription for qualitative research, you really, really have to spend time making sure that if you're not doing your own transcriptions, you got to make sure that it was transcribed appropriately. And Dr. Jones, I think it was Dr. Jones, made mention of the fact that your participants can also go over the data. I gave my participants that option. But one of the things, Theta and Dr. Rodentrader, if you're still here, one of my participants was talking about a 9-night. And a 9-night in our culture is a practice when someone dies. And so she was explaining what happened at this event, and the transcription was jacked up. But fortunately, of course, I knew what it was. So data transcription, you need to protect it so that you can protect the integrity of it. And protecting it means that you are reviewing it to ensure the accuracy along with your participants.
Thank you, Jason, for that great question. We are at the end, unfortunately, but I want to, if you all would allow me for one moment, because I want to ask, and I didn't check with them first, so I apologize now. I'll take my review later, but I want to give the opportunity for Dr. Roten Trader, as well as our Dean of our college, Dr. Beverly O'Brien, who they are also here with us. I don't know if you all would like to share any comments or bring any greetings. If so, I will bring you to the stage. Dr. Roten Trader, would you be interested?
Hi, yes, everybody. Pleasant good evening to you now. It has been a pleasure. I apologize for not being able to hear the entire presentation, particularly of my colleague, Dr. Rice, but I'm certain that his presentation was edifying. And this has been wonderful. As a research geek, it is so nice to be in the company of like-minded individuals. And so I thank you, Dr. Burley, for extending this invitation. And I'm delighted that I was able to jump in. And I look to get any links that pertain to the other presenters so that I can glean some insight. So thank you all so very much. Kudos to all of you. And Dr. Anderson, I see my team is well represented. Team CJ rocks. Yes.
Yes, Team CJ. Dean O'Brien, would you like to share anything?
Well, simply thank you, Dr. Rowley, for the opportunity, and simply that I am really proud of this evening. It's a wonderful opportunity for students to be hearing the research of the faculty. I mean, that is a wonderful thing. Sometimes we get so enamored with all of the other parts of what we do that the research that we're also engaged in never gets spoken of. And so I'm really happy about that. Secondly, it was really a very interesting discussion. And I as time goes on, I think the students who are participating will appreciate even more what they heard today. Unless you're involved sometimes in research, sometimes you have to walk in those shoes before you understand what someone is talking about. And when Dr. Buckley was talking about whether you have preconceived notions about your research before you start, which actually is kind of a natural thing. We do have those kind of thoughts about what we think we're going to find, and we just don't really know. And then when you find out that it's completely opposite of what you thought, but that was the reason for the research in the first place. So that's a good thing. And so, but it made it very personable. And the other thing about research is that you find that it becomes a significant part of your life, because somehow or another you seem to be drawn to those things you either have questions about. I think someone asked that question, how many of you wanted to know, is that you, Melissa? Who wants to know everything? You ever worry about other people's business?
That was me.
I'm still trying to figure out how Dr. Gilliam never thought about that, but
no, she was teasing. She was teasing.
Oh, okay. But it was all very interesting, and I thank you, Dr. Burley, for hosting this. This was super. Really, I'm so proud of you for doing this. So happy for you doing this, and I look forward to it's being done again. It was wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I couldn't get here earlier too, but this wouldn't have fit into my schedule. So I thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean O'Brien. We appreciate you. We were just talking about you before we started, and the students all echoed how supportive you always are to the events that we have in our college. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and then before I give it back to Dr. Anderson, just want to have Dr. Gilliam, if she wants to say something as well, our illustrious chair of the Department of Social Work.
I just want to say congratulations to Dr. Burley, and thank you to all of the researchers for sharing your information. So I had like such a burning question about self-care. How did y'all fit self-care in? So I want everybody to be thinking about that. That was it was so good, so good. So thank you all. And yeah, Dean, I was really like, yeah, no, we never want to know about anybody's business in social work. The basis of our profession. Without being nosy, we would have no jobs. We didn't get in people's business. But thank you so much for this, Dr. Burley, and to the seniors. I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks as we count down. I just wanted to say thank you, though, Dr. Burley. This was awesome, and thank you to you too, Dr. Anderson. I know this was your mashup as mentor, mentee. This was an awesome start off for that process. So thank you.
I wanted to thank Dr. Pointer too. That was her suggestion in the chat and Chew to do this, to have these match up with the mentors and mentees. So this is the first time we've ever done that. And so I don't know if she got a chance to be here or not, but she'd be mighty proud of this. It was wonderful, wonderful. And while I have this second, especially with social work students who I know will spread the word, I want to remind you that we're having the social for all CBSS students, something the social work students already do, but we're doing it for the whole CBSS, and that's coming up tomorrow night. And then the Dean's Dialogue is Friday. So look out for those notices, because you're all welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean. We did, we announced that just before we started. So
oh, great.
We're well aware. And I want to bring back to the stage Dr. Anderson. And like this actually started, this whole presentation, this plan was in the works actually before the mentee, the assignment that we had. And Dr. Buckley is also one of my mentees as well. So wait, let me just pin, okay? Because clearly I can't talk and pin at the same time. Okay, there we go. So I'm just, excited. I really, before I turn over to Dr. Anderson, thank you all so much again. I really enjoyed all of your presentations. I took notes and I have recorded this, so I will be posting this in all of my classes, and I'll share it with Dr. Anderson and Dr. Rice so that you all can share it with Team CJ. And we have Dr. Rose's article as well. So thank you all so much. And thank you for the students, because you all asked some amazing, amazing questions. So I really appreciate it. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Anderson to close us out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Burley. It was an absolute pleasure planning it with you, and just an amazing, absolutely amazing event, and learning so much from our panelists who took time out from their busy schedules to share all of their insight on qualitative research. And the questions were amazing, and it was just an incredible afternoon. So I am very energized by this. Insights that we learned today, I will be able to take back to my research classes. So it was just a great day, and thank you all so very much. So I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of their early evening.
All right, we are officially dismissed. Now, thank you to the students, because I know we are 10 minutes over the end time for our typically our class ends at 5:30. So thank you all for staying on. And my students know I stay on and hang out a little bit longer, but we're officially done. So good night, everyone. Enjoy the remaining sunshine. Be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much. Yes, thank you so much.
Dr. Burley, could I speak to you for a minute?
Of course. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Wait,
I'm gonna hang around. I need to talk to you, Dr. Burley.
Okay. Oh, and I forgot.